Hey everyone, my name is Zach. I'm a 23-year-old competitive boulderer from Canada, currently living in Montreal. Welcome back to the COMPCLIMB training series, where I record most of my training, provide in-depth analysis of every session, and just chat about climbing with an emphasis on competition. So today, I guess we're having a bit of a fast forward. The last video that took place was the session where Maddie and I climbed at Bloc shop, and we did a bit of a vlog. And in that video, we were talking about how we were doing our last little comp prep session for the Jackalope event that was happening in a city called Mississauga, which is just outside Toronto. And so the plan was to do a video for that event, but the long story short was that I've been mentioning how I've been dealing with a bad finger on my left hand. My left middle finger is pretty sore. It's like, I don't know if it's tweaked. It's definitely aching and hurting a lot recently. And I've dealt with this in the past before, and it will usually just go away after a month or two. But the format of the Jackalope competition was a qualifying round where they had a particularly long wait in between boulders, and actually, coincidentally, had like a lot of crimp lines in this qualifying round as well. And basically, this qualifying round was just a recipe for disaster for a finger that is not fully healthy. And I was quite sure that I was asking for an injury if I tried too hard in this qualifying round. So I was like trying to warm up, and the long lines were just preventing me from getting warm. And I could tell that I'd have to really push it to have a chance at making finals. So I actually pulled out of the competition quite early on. For anyone who is wondering why I just was hanging around at the comp, not climbing. But Maddie did not have to deal with any injuries for the event, and she was able to do it in its entirety, and she finished second. But unfortunately for Maddie, her camera crew, being myself, my dad, and my brother, were kind of like pathetic during the final round, and we didn't coordinate our videography of Maddie very well at all, and we ended up getting like terrible footage. So there's just not going to be a video from the Jackalope event, at least on our YouTube channel. I think at the time I'm recording this, I'm not sure what Rage is up to, but I'm sure he'll do like some edits for social media of the final round and of Maddie in particular. So you can go check out my Instagram if you want to see like a bit of footage from the Jackalope. It was definitely a super fun event, and finals was a good show. So anyway, this session that Maddie and I are having here is about 2 days after the Jackalope. And yeah, we're just getting back into the swing of things with some regular sessions of bouldering. And Maddie and I are lucky to have a day that lines up with our schedules so we can session together. And also, let's check out this boulder that we're doing here actually right now. This one will feature a pretty cool tip of the day. So for today's tip of the day, we're going to be talking about the concept of floating. So the way that I would describe floating is sort of knowing how much to jump between two holds based on how positive or bad they are. So let's say, in my opinion, there could be like 3 tiers of floating. You could have the first tier, let's call the first tier is like not really a float. It's just like you have 2 pretty positive holds. You just got to jump and smash between the 2 holds and just take a big swing. And then we have the second tier of float where the holds are like a little bit worse, but they still have just enough bite where you have to definitely control how much you jump in order to not have too much swing, but you have a bit of room to like swing around. Whereas like a third tier float is like a situation where the holds are so bad that you have to be so still on the move that any little bit too much backswing, you're going to be off the holds. So this move that we're going to be talking about today, I definitely qualify as like a second tier float where the holds are a little bit positive, more so like the right hand, like the left hand's pretty bad. But at the same time, if we jump too much, the holds are going to be too bad to hold a crazy swing off, especially because the wall is so steep. So we have to make sure that we jump with a really good amount of momentum and keeping our body pretty still in this movement to not swing too much off the holds. So this is basically the concept of floating. Now, when we're talking about how we should approach these different kinds of movements, that's where I have like a bit of advice. So we can refer back to Maddie's first attempt on this boulder. She almost treated this move as what we could consider like a first tier float, right? Or just basically like a jump move. Let's not even call it a float, because when we're dealing with the first tier, the idea is that we don't have to float. So she kind of had 2 feet on the wall and she just like kind of jumped and smashed right up for the next hold. And like kind of got caught off guard by how bad the holds were. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, maybe we want to control our momentum a bit more based on Maddie making the holds look like they're definitely not jugs. And so you can see here what I'm trying on this attempt is I'm intentionally bringing my right foot away from the wall. And what this does is it takes a bit of my weight like further away from the wall, putting me like in a straight line down underneath these slopers, which is how we usually achieve the most stable position with slopers, right? This is a pretty fundamental technique for climbing. Is the more that you're hanging straight down under the sloper, the better friction you're gonna get and the more balance you'll be able to achieve with your center of gravity. So I'm taking a bit of my weight away from the wall, and what I'm gonna try and do is just throw it up in like a straight line and try and minimize the amount of backswing as much as possible that I can have. Now, since this is kind of like a second tier float, I have a bit more room to kind of like play around with my swing, and I actually need a bit of momentum to actually do this jump move because it is definitely a jump. So you'll notice my right leg kind of swings a little bit into the wall as I'm going up, just because the move is kind of a moon kick. But because I already took it away from the wall, it's still optimizing like, you know, that 25% of what I need in order to not have too much backswing. Whereas if my right foot was on the foot and I just jumped off of it, now that's just gonna be ripping me back off the wall. So by analyzing this move and saying, okay, this is kind of like a second tier float, I need to bring a bit of my weight away from the wall and kind of just throw it straight upwards. Like that's sort of what it means to do a float move, is to have your weight away from the wall and throw it straight up rather than letting it rip back. So I realize this, I go and I try it on this attempt and it works out pretty well. And yeah, in like the situation where these holds are even worse, I wouldn't be able to have my leg even come in as much as it does on this try. But because this is like a second tier float and the holds are just good enough, I can afford to do this. But in the situation where this is a third tier float, I wouldn't let my leg go in and I would keep all my weight away from the wall the whole time and just go in a straight line and minimize the amount of backswing as much as possible. And in that scenario, I would hit the next hold and nothing would move, right? I would hit the hold perfectly at the apex, and since all my weight is brought away from the wall, I wouldn't have a backswing. So that's what this move would look like as like a third tier float. But a second tier float, you notice I have more swing. And yeah, you can see I'm like kind of explaining this to Maddie, and on her next attempt, she's gonna go try and implement this just by simply bringing her right leg away from the wall. It's gonna help her optimize with the backswing on this move, and it works out pretty well for her. So yeah, you can see I'm giving Maddie my little explanation in real time, and here she's able to implement it. And even just that slight micro optimization of bringing some weight away from the wall with her right leg helps her stick the move quite fast. And yeah, this is like, I think, something that, like I was saying in the vlog, Block Shop that we had with Maddie, we're definitely gonna make an effort to start sessioning together more. One, because I think it's an interesting dynamic that we don't take advantage enough on this channel. And it's fun to like see us climb together and see our styles contrast. Maddie's definitely really good at things that I'm bad at, and vice versa. So it makes for interesting content for sure. And it's also quite good for Maddie's training. I mean, it's definitely good for my training, but even more so for Maddie, because basically for her whole career, she's just used to climbing alone. And I have always been of the opinion that the best climbing coaches are simply just our friends or the people that we climb with, and talking about movement in real time with a friend that's at a similar level to you that is also trying the movements, and really trying to verbalize your thoughts and talk about why a movement is working or why it isn't working. It helps not only you learn more about what you're actually trying to solve on the wall simply by verbalizing it, but it of course helps whoever you're climbing with think critically about movements that you're trying, because you're just sharing ideas. But yeah, it's like, even if I'm not necessarily, teaching her anything about movement, I always try to get her to explain to me like why she's moving her body in a certain way, or how she's thinking about a boulder. And it's almost like note-taking when you're in class, And the whole idea with note-taking is at least one of the ideas is that writing something down is going to help you remember it better. And it's the same thing with talking about climbing movements. If you kind of just make an effort to verbalize what you're thinking, oftentimes something can click. Even just by talking about it, you'll sort of realize what you're thinking just by saying it out loud, and it can help you figure out movements more effectively. So anyway, the whole point of this idea is that this is definitely an aspect of Maddie's training that she has been missing for a few years now, and is something that I think has helped me immensely over the years. And so I want to make sure Maddie feels this effect as well. Like my childhood friend and training partner, Ben, from back home in Ontario, he is basically like my best climbing coach, right? We had so many sessions together when we were younger, and basically all of these, tips of the day that I like to share are things that me and Ben talked about for years and years. And we really broke down these ideas and learned about them together in real time. And he has a list on his phone that's titled something like Zachisms, that I basically got him to send me. And I use this list to refer to sometimes when I need inspiration for a tip of the day. But yeah, the moral of the story is that your peers are your most valuable coaches. And recently, Maddie and I have just been not even making an effort to coordinate, just because we have different training programs. But especially now that we have about a month and a half before the next competition, we can afford to play around with our schedules and force it a bit more to climb together. And I think that this can help give Maddie the edge that she needs going into the last few World Cups of the season, and really hammer some good movement skills into her system, because she's already so strong. And just climbing more with me, I think can maybe help her figure out some beta that she needs to work on, or movement skills. And especially when it's comes to technical boulders and slabs in particular, such as this one here, she also teaches me a lot, of course. Even though she's not the best at explaining why she can do a move, I learned this quite early on from Maddie. I'd say, "Hey Maddie, how did you just do that thing that you did on the slab boulder with your hips?" And she's like, "I don't know, I just did it." So at least I learned from the visual from Maddie. I see her do things, and I can try and intuit what she's doing, even though she's just so naturally good at climbing that sometimes she doesn't understand what she can do. So yeah, for example, on this boulder, I'm trying to watch her and figure out how she's doing the first move of this thing, because it's very, very strange. It's a lot of trying to perch on this left foot, because the hand is obviously almost useless. It's such a bad sloper. But Maddie is able to find this interesting meat hook with her right hand that I would not have thought of, and find a really good perch position. And while I was trying to mimic what I was seeing her do, it definitely helped me close the gap between making that move go for me and just feeling impossible. But I still wasn't quite able to execute it as well as she did. That's a really Maddie style boulder, and I couldn't quite do it. But anyway, yeah, Maddie and I will definitely make an effort to start climbing together more, and I think it's going to be fun content, and we'll make for some interesting chats about our sessions. And then, yeah, I guess I haven't mentioned yet either that we are at Allez Up Mile End It's been a little bit since I've climbed here, so we had lots of fresh boulders in the gym. And the idea with where I'm at right now with my training schedule, oh, I guess I also haven't mentioned, after like having to pull out of the Jackalope event, I realized that I really just need to let my finger heal like to 100%. So I'm also not gonna do the Boston comp this weekend, which is definitely a bummer. It looked like it would be a fun event, but I would very much rather not make my finger worse and have it like be fully healed. And the Boston comp is supposed to have like a strong field of competitors. And if I would want to like do well, I'd have to try really hard, which is exactly not necessarily what you want to do with a hurt finger. Whereas in these like regular sessions of bouldering, I can just take it chill, avoid crimps, or just drop off the wall if I feel unstable. Whereas you cannot do this in a competition, of course. So no Boston comp this weekend. Maddie's gonna skip it too, which means we have like about a month and a half with no comps, which also means that I have some time to play around with my training if I want. So I think I'm gonna take like maybe a couple weeks to just do some unfocused climbing, have some fun, probably experiment with the content a bit. And then in a couple weeks, maybe I'll structure up my training again, because like there are definitely some comps that it would be nice to be in good shape for coming up in September, like the sort of dyno comp at Beta Bloc called Dead Point, and then like the Rose Block Championship. And Canadian Nationals also isn't too far away if you think about it. So we'll go forward for a couple weeks with just some fun sessions, and then I'll structure up my training pretty soon. But for now, we're just gonna probably be bouldering for the most part. Maybe I'll campus around a bit because that's fun too. But yeah, let's jump into our next session of bouldering, which I think we're gonna be doing at Bloc Shop Chabanel. And so here we are at Bloc Shop now. And the idea with Bloc Shop was to do something that I think I was talking about a few videos ago now. What I try to avoid in my training often is doing one of my 2 sessions at a gym filled with a whole lot of new boulders for me. And what I try to be intentional about is either doing 2 sessions at a gym full of new boulders, or doing 1 session each at 2 different gyms with not a lot of new boulders for me. And this is just a training tactic that I implement to avoid like sort of losing control and trying too many boulders. And what this does is it leads to me like messing up my skin really badly, or just overexerting myself, getting frustrated because I'm not sending enough boulders, all of these things. So since we finished off quite a lot of the boulders at Allez Up, I didn't want to go to a gym with a whole lot of new boulders for this second session. Otherwise, I would just get carried away. And Maddie and I have been climbing at Bloc Shop Chabanel recently, so there wasn't too many new boulders to try. There was actually kind of the perfect amount. And I knew that there was this boulder up. I saw this one while Maddie and I were having our session during that vlog we filmed. And during that vlog, it was supposed to be just kind of like a chill session to get prepared for the comp. So I definitely don't want to be hopping on this Bloc Shop white tape during a chill session. So I thought today would be the perfect day to come try it. And going into this session, I was like pretty content if this boulder would end up taking me just the whole session to project, and we could just have a chill session kind of focused on one boulder. And it would be nice to send it, but I was also prepared for this just to be a project. And speaking of it being a project, you saw that I actually ran the ending of this boulder first. And that's because I'm definitely not necessarily approaching this boulder expecting to flash it. I very rarely do that with the white tapes at Bloc Shop because they're usually just my physical limit. So I implemented a training tactic as well on this boulder where I just make sure that I gain some muscle memory for the last half of this boulder, which will eliminate me having a very pumpy flash go of the boulder. Like let's say I try really hard on my flash go and get really high up and just pump out. It's gonna probably ruin the session trying to recover from that pump. So now when I make it up to here from the beginning, I already have the muscle memory for these moves. I already know what to do, and it will help me not only not pump out on this boulder, but also just get the send, which I'm able to do quite fast actually. I think this is probably the quickest I've done a white tape in a while. And this one didn't feel that soft. Like, it's maybe on the lower end of the white tapes, but this one was just like super my style. The boulder simply asked the question, do you have like this level of fitness to just bear down on these holds for like 10 moves in a row and not like pump out? And on that last move, actually, I was like quite exhausted. So while I got a quick send of that boulder, it was pretty hard. And I think it felt like a legit white tape. And so my mini goal for the session was accomplished. I was kind of just preparing to try that boulder for this session at Block Shop. And so I could kind of just mess around for a bit on the other boulders. So I got on this orange holds black tape that I had yet to try at Block Shop. And that boulder was actually surprisingly really cool. It had a very cool drop knee sequence at the end there. And then Maddie was also climbing with me during this session, and we were trying this crimpy black tape together. And this one I thought honestly looked like super soft, and it was a bit soft until you get up to this last move. This last move is very tricky. You kind of don't have anything to do with your feet. And the last couple slopers are not super bad, but they're not super good. And you just definitely don't have like an obvious sequence. So anyway, I had an idea of something fun to try at the top of this boulder, and I was prepared for it just to be stupid and not work. But I was actually feeling pretty good during this session, and it allowed me to take a pretty cool one-arm swing off this finish hold. I was pretty proud of that actually. And so I say, hey Maddie, don't stop the recording. I just want to show off my work and point out the fact that there's no jib on the finish hold of that. So yeah, I was pretty proud of my one-armer I took off of that sloper. And so the plan was to just finish with a few red tapes, keep this session relatively short, relatively chill. I'm coming off like attempting to do a comp, and then the day after that, I actually had like a pretty short kilter session with my friend Ben that I was talking about earlier in the video. And yeah, so it's actually been like a few days now since I've done like a proper double session day of training. So I definitely wanted to ease into it a little bit. And I think both of these sessions today ended up being just about around 45 minutes, which is on the shorter side for my sessions. Usually they're at least an hour. And so check out the finish of this V9 here. This ending was actually super difficult, and I'm like cruxing out on this knee bar sequence, and I felt like I was gonna fall on every one of those moves. Those holds at the end there were really bad, and yeah, that was like low-key a 5-star boulder too. A really cool sequence on some bad holds at the end there. And so anyway, this boulder here is gonna end up being the last one of our session, and at the time I'm recording this, I haven't gone and done the next day of training yet. So since I'm not actually on a program right now, I'm basically just waking up in the morning and deciding what I want to do for the day. Even though there's no program, I still prefer double sessions. I like to just do like short little bursts of climbing for an hour at a time. So that's sort of why I did a double session today, even though it's not necessarily scheduled in on a program. But yeah, the plan is to just wake up tomorrow morning and whatever I'm feeling like doing, I'm gonna do. And maybe it might be campusing. I've been really enjoying the campus training recently, and I always feel like nice and explosive after some campus sessions under my belt. So potentially campus tomorrow, but let's find out right now. So we're jumping into the next day of training, and it's going to be indeed taking place at Bloc Hochelaga. And so the plan was to campus today, but the idea was I was actually going to go for a mixed session, which I don't usually do when I'm on like a strict training schedule and I'm like in my just more dedicated training season. But like I've been talking about recently, the comps are pretty much over, at least the important ones for the season. So we're just in kind of like have fun mode, which means that I might play around with my sessions a bit and say, hey, like this session that I'm about to have, I can just go into the gym and do whatever I want. And like that can mean that I do a mixture of maybe campusing and bouldering in one session, which is very uncommon for me. So the vibe I was feeling today was I wanted to try this white tape that's up at Bloc Hochelaga. And then if I was able to send this boulder, I would basically go do a campus session afterwards. And so you can see I am finally sticking this super cool crux move on this boulder. When I was looking at this thing, I was very excited to try that move, like the jump move off the sloper. I thought it looked like an absolutely superhero move. And basically that move was like the inspiration to not just do a campus session and do like a mixture session of bouldering and campusing. But yeah, when I was looking at this boulder, I thought, okay, it looks super beta intensive, but it looks super doable. So I thought that maybe I could get a send of this thing in like 20 minutes and then maybe go have like a 20 to 30 minute campus session. But what we're going to find out as we're projecting this thing is that it proved to be a little bit harder than I thought. So when I stuck this sloper move individually, it felt pretty reasonable, but this move is very difficult to do from the start. You can see I was kind of going along for a wild ride on that last attempt. And yeah, it's like you have to kind of throw your momentum super perfectly, similar to like the idea of floating that we were talking about earlier in the episode. Except the tricky thing about this move is the fact that you have to jump out of a bicycle position. Otherwise, you can't actually hold this sloper. So there's no way for me to really bring any of my weight away from the wall to do this move, which means that I just have this force sort of ripping me back. But let's check this out really quick. So I thought of this beta early on, but I really was caught up in trying the superhero jump move, and I thought it was so epic that I said, let me just see if I can stick this move the cool way. But now, as I'm like realizing that my fitness is fading and I'm getting more tired as the session goes on, I kind of just want to send the boulder. So I say, okay, let me try this potential left heel hook beta. And it's like so much better. Although you see the last move is not a gimme. And I actually fell there because I was trying to slowly lock off to this finish where you kind of it's better to do a bit of like a more dynamic pull, which I am going to attempt going into my next tries. But yeah, this cut feet move is a little bit difficult. I just have to really emphasize pinching the right hand sloper. But this cut feet and then getting a high heel is much easier than trying to do the superhero jump move up to the sloper, which is why it ends up working for me better in the end. And so now I'm up here and I'm like, I really don't want to fall again because I'm really starting to get tired and hope is going to fade of sending this boulder if I don't do it now. So I was able to do it luckily. And thankfully the top out on this one wasn't too bad because I'm topping out on this particular wall at Bloc Shop is notoriously a weakness of mine. So that boulder took about like 45 minutes to get a send of. So I realized it was a bit late for a campus session. Definitely probably not really worth it to do like a 5 to 10 minute campus session. So I said, okay, I'll just finish the session trying this other cool boulder on the new set at Hochelaga, which is this very cool like campus paddle move with a bit of a blocker mixed in if the move wasn't already low percentage enough. And this one was super cool and a fun way to end the session. And yeah, that like wraps up these couple days of training. Like I said, I don't really have a plan, so I just wake up every day and wing it. So I don't necessarily know what we're going to be looking forward to in the next episode. But yeah, tune in to find out. Insert catchy video here.